Before I launch into this business of talking about, what it's like to go into space, which is really all I'm going to talk about today, people say, well, you were a scientist, then you became an astronaut, and which is a completely engaging activity, by the way. You do science in 5-minute increments every other week as an astronaut. So, it took me 6 years to write this paper that I published last year. Which did I like most? I liked both most. I loved being a scientist. I thought being a scientist was one of the most rewarding, looking back, one of the most rewarding, fun things ever. And I got to do some amazing things and got to meet some amazing people. And it was during what was and is a golden age for Earth science, I think. Not only is what Earth scientists doing really good science, really interesting, but it doesn't hurt that you're going to save the planet in the process. And I figured out, based on the amount I contributed to the IPCC document, that the Nobel Prize, I have 2 milligores of a Nobel Prize, where 1 gore is half a Nobel Prize. And I got 2 milligores, so it's not much. So when I'm done with being a scientist, an astronaut, I'm really looking forward to going back to science, because it's something that's fully engaging. However, let's talk about being an astronaut. And what I'm going to do today is give you a kind of inside the cockpit, inside the spacesuit view of what it's like to go into space, in the early part of the 21st century, when things are still difficult and dangerous and expensive and hard, but very, very interesting and rewarding nonetheless. Now, the physics of getting into space is very unforgiving. You need to get whatever it is you're traveling in up into orbit, which means you need to get yourself from sitting on your back in Florida to 5 miles per second. 5 miles per second in a very short time. So you can imagine that the energies are very, very large, right? In fact, the energy of a shuttle, if you were to let it all off at once on the pad, is a small nuclear weapon, which is why when you're sitting on the pad, when the crew's there, there's 6 of you in the vehicle, and all the smart people are at least 3 miles away. So, no kidding. There is no one within 3 miles when the vehicle is fully tanked and ready to go. So the energies are very, very huge. And to make it worthwhile to put anything up there, the structures have to be very, very light. Okay? They have to be as light as possible. So this combination of very large energy and very light structure is a very unforgiving combination, as we've seen in the history of space travel. For example, this is the shuttle orbiter. I'm going to re-inflate it, it's leaking. It is rated, that is, the engineers will swear, that it will survive going to a vertical acceleration of 3.5 g before anything breaks. The acceleration that we actually put it up to during launch is 3 g. So you're cutting it fine. You are really cutting it fine. Your bridge that you travel on the way to work is a factor of 8 in safety, minimum. And most engineers, when they're building a bridge, throw in another factor of 2, just out of neurosis. I mean, they do that. So it's usually a factor of 16. So all the things that we drive, cars, planes, buses, all the rest, they're over-engineered by a lot. Space vehicles cannot, and they are not. All right, let's talk about actually the practicality of getting into space. It was decided at the last days of Apollo that we were going to build a shuttle, and it was going to be better and reusable and all the rest of it. And immediately they ran into the difficulties of trying to recover a winged vehicle from orbit. So this is the shuttle orbiter. As you know, it glides down. It's a winged vehicle. It doesn't have much in the way of wings. So it glides down a little bit better than a bomb. Comes down very fast. Its light, when it's empty, is 100 tons. Just 100 tons. And you compare that, it's about the same size as DC-9, but half the weight. Very, very light. A lot of advanced structures in. Incredible engineering went into making this. Now, when you want to launch it into space, it's got 3 very high performance reusable engines on the back that use hydrogen and oxygen. But it became obvious, in the first day of thinking about making shuttle, that you could not put all the propellant in here. You have to have a tank to carry all the prop. So here's your prop tank. And the top part, from about here up, is oxygen, slush. It looks like a Slurpee. It's kind of a slurry. And the bottom half is hydrogen. and it's fed through two gigantic 17-inch diameter pipes into the orbiter. The quick 17-inch disconnects, and they come from the tank into the orbiter. So here you are. You've got bags of gas, 8.5 minutes worth of gas, 3 motors on the bottom. Couldn't possibly get off the pad fully fueled, too heavy. So solve that. Cutting a long story short, with 2 solid fuel rockets, okay, basically firework rockets. And these are strapped on like so. And these generate about 75% of the thrust at liftoff. And after about 2 minutes, 2 and a bit minutes, you throw them away. They're expended. And at that point, there's enough propellant has been burned down in the tank for these guys to carry on. And as you burn down the propellant in the tank, the mass gets lower, the thrust stays the same, so you accelerate faster and faster from 1.5 G all the way up to 3 G, at which point the throttles automatically hold you at 3 G to prevent overstressing the vehicle. Okay, so what happens during launch? We all get in, everybody goes away. The ground launch sequencer takes this whole system through all these checks and stuff, and then a few minutes before launch, it turns over the control to the brains in the shuttle. Then the shuttle tells the Stank what to do. And what it does is 3 seconds before launch is it lights these 3 engines. And the thrust from that pushes the whole stack over like this, because it's suspended on it's bolted down with these 2 solid fuel rockets. The whole thing bends over like that. When the computer is satisfied that all 3 motors are firing correctly and there's no problem, it sends the command to light these 2 solid rocket boosters. Now at that point, you're going somewhere. Somebody said to me once, you don't necessarily know where, but you're definitely going somewhere. The hold-down bolts are blown with explosives, and off you go. The point is that you can't turn these boosters off once you've lit them. They're solid fuel. They're like a firework rocket. You can turn these guys off. So you do the check. Okay, my liquids are good. Fire the solids. Off we go. Then you go up, clear the tower, and almost immediately, one of the most hair-raising things in the whole program, you twist the whole stack and turn towards the orbital plane of station, because a few minutes earlier, station went flying over, and that's where you're going. So you're aiming for it. Off you go. 2 minutes into flight. Off these guys come. You'll see this. The Italian photographer on here photographs this thing leaving. Off you go. Mach 13, heads up towards the horizon. Mach 25, 5 miles per second, nose down, off. And here you go. This falls into the Indian Ocean. And you are in orbit. Well, we have some time for some questions and answers, and then a little bit right at the end. So, what's it feel like, the effects of gravity? It's horrible. When you're coming back, you've been in space for a couple of weeks, you feel good in space. The transition going to space takes 2 days to feel good, or 2 or 3 days. Then just about 99% of people feel good. So that's good. Then coming back in, you start feel the weight build up. You start feel, I get backache immediately on entry. Your spine compresses. Then the worst thing is when you move your head, all your inner ear is screwed up. You start feeling you're violently pitching over this way or twisting that way, just moving your head like this. So you be very careful doing that. When you get on the ground, you feel like you're 100 years old, weak, huge weight pressing on you, and somehow the coordination of walking doesn't work, and I felt like for the first couple of hours that I was walking along the side of a mountain. The whole world was tipped over, and I was somehow walking on the side of a mountain like this. And then when I'm being driven back to the ops building, we're driving along, and I felt that I was in a vehicle that was driving under the world, upside down, but it was okay. I was driving like this, and the world was completely upside down ball. And about 2 days later, almost all of that is gone. You feel good. Though we've had recently people coming back from flights, longer flights. We had 2 guys on one crew. One ripped a calf muscle, one broke a foot on the first day of coming back from orbit, because they just coordination and strength wasn't there. So coming back is harder than going up. Ma'am?
How long do people stay on this space station?
6 months at a shot. We had one Russian stayed up there for 14 months. It was mainly because while he was up there, the Soviet Union became Russia. And there was an interruption in the vehicles. So he was kind of, they phoned him up and said, you know, man, I'm sorry, you know. So he stayed up there. So when he came back, his shoulder patch was literally politically incorrect. You know, it really was. It's still Soviet. But I've met him a few times. He claims he's perfectly okay. And he's a doctor. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about the science that's going on the station?
Science going on the station. Less than I would like. Right now we're doing a lot of human physiology, medicine stuff, basically geared towards long duration space flight, muscle loss, bone, vestibular stuff, nutrition, all those things that govern long duration space flight. We're doing some material science, some stuff that, you know, what do they call those things? A solution, suspension of bubbles in liquids and things. Emulsions and molten materials, how they behave in 0G. Some crystal growth work. There's some stuff going on with material science that's good. And let's see what else. Machinery and tech development. All the life support systems have been designed and redesigned during space station. None of them worked first time. So they've all been revamped. So if we're ever going to go anywhere, this has turned out to be a good investment for getting the machinery to work better. So long story short, I would say there was some science application work has been done on orbit and a lot of tech development, but no what I would call a Nobel laureate science has been done yet. Yeah. The training. What kind of training? It's long. There's lots of it. You know, in short summary, you arrive at Johnson Space Center. You do a 2-year basic astronaut training, which is all the space station systems, all the shuttle systems, a lot of flight training on their little jet fighters, spacewalker training in the tank, the suit, and a whole lot of virtual reality training on various systems. And then you do a technical job. I was sent to Russia for 2.5 years, pretty much. And then eventually you get pulled back in to train for your mission, and that takes 1 to 2 years depending on the mission. And that's task specific, you know, simulations of shuttle procedures and station stuff, and then more simulated spacewalking and all the rest of it. So it's a lot. It was about 6 and a bit years from me joining the astronaut corps to flying. And that's kind of average. It's long haul. And then the flights come quicker after that. Should do.
How'd they decide you'd be a good spacewalker?
They throw you in the pool and see how you do. That's really how they do it. You
had an aptitude.
Yeah. To be a good spacewalker, you've got to be not good at anything else. No, not really. You got to be. It's really simple. Reach is incredibly important. You have all this stuff on your suit, and your work volume is between the front of your suit and the tips of your fingers. So if your arms are short, you know, this stays the same. Your work volume goes down. So long arms and reasonable upper body strength are key. And if you've done a lot of mechanical things, like take apart British motorcycles that would never work, that helps too, mechanical aptitude too. So those are the main things we're looking for. You know, they talk about the different mental aptitudes for these tasks. If you want to be a shuttle pilot or commander, you have to be the icy-minded master of technology. If you're a robotics engineer, you have to be able to think in 3D very well and be cool, calm, collect, and the rest of it. If you want to be a spacewalker, you've got to be a gladiator. Because you're in the holding tank, and as soon as the hatch opens, you have to perform. And it's a race. And it's very physical, very, very physical job. So, you know, we're kind of the gorillas of space, sort of. Ma'am? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. There tend to be fewer proportionally women spacewalkers than male spacewalkers just because of size, the size distribution. But we have plenty of female spacewalkers. And if you were to rack them up in a room, they tend to be the larger women in the group, larger, stronger women in the group, because it's a physical job. If we're going to do something like change out, we match up our spacewalker pairs quite carefully depending on the job. And if there is a bolt that's down there, we'll try and get one of the guys who's 6'3" and got very long arms involved in the, we match up the pairs. Strength and reach isn't everything. To be honest, not for a while. I think, you see how difficult it is to just get there and to get back. The thing that goes, the SpaceX prize, thing that launched up 60 miles, then came back, and they're going to do commercial with Virgin Galactic. Okay, just to put that in perspective, to do a suborbital lob, reach zero velocity 60 miles above the Earth, come back down, okay, requires a departure velocity of a Mach 3.5, whereas to stay in orbit is Mach 25, which is 50 times the energy, 50 times the energy to get into orbit than to do one of these lobs per pound. And by the way, having got that energy, you have to get rid of it when you come back, which means heat shield, controlled entry, dynamics, recovery systems, whether it's chutes or wings or whatever. So the whole business of orbital flight is, I think, 50 times as hard as suborbital ballistic flight. So don't be fooled when someone says, "Hey, look, we're going to space commercially now." That was done by NASA in 1960, and then they quit doing it immediately to move on to the orbital thing. So if you want to go into space for 3 minutes, you can go do that for probably $100,000 in a couple of years. But in terms of going to orbit, I think it's going to be tougher. You're going to need more money or wait longer. Or join the astronaut corps.
So, three G's of acceleration going up. What kind of acceleration do you experience coming back down?
Well, almost nothing out of the ordinary. You hit the atmosphere, and you start feeling a very small deceleration this way. 0.4 G, something like that, 0.2 G, very small, because you use the whole of the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean as a brake, 40 minutes worth. So there's a long time and a lot of atmosphere to slow down. And what you really feel is, as you get slower and slower, is you start feeling you're losing orbital velocity. You're not an orbital thing anymore, so you start feeling the gravity vector come back up through the floor. And you don't really feel this so much as this. So now you're doing 1 G and you're in the upper atmosphere and you say, "Oh, I can stand this is all right." And then you come to Florida, and part of the maneuver is a steep turn to come round, and then they pull 2 G on that, and you go, "Oh God, I'm going to die." And we have a G suit that inflatable kind of chaps around your leg, and you crank that up, it inflates, it crushes your legs, keeps the blood in your upper body, otherwise you might pass out. So you keep that guy inflated. Yes, yes. How does Earth science look different to me after flying in space? I was surprised by this. I've met one astronaut who says, I went into space and my life changed completely. And he went all mystical like this. So I thought, well, I wonder if that'll happen to me. That didn't happen to me. I went into space as somebody who'd always wanted to go into space to see what it was like, but also as a scientist, because my whole life I'd been a scientist. And so I looked at the things that I'd studied as a scientist and that other friends had told me about. And I got educated through my friends, really. And I was astounded at how different things looked from the way that I'd had them in my head before I went. The first thing that absolutely shattered me was how thin the atmosphere is. When I looked at the Earth's limb, I could see the thunderheads over the equator, the 60,000 foot cumulonimbus clouds, these big ones. They came up 1/3 of the atmosphere that I could see above. So ground, thunderhead, another 2/3 of blue, black. That's it. So when you look up, you know you're looking at space pretty much with a very, very thin layer of atmosphere there. And one of the things that amazed me was hurricanes. We fly over these hurricanes. And I always thought in my head somehow, because of the physics, the calculations we had done and the photos I'd seen, the hurricane was a big boiling thing and went up like this and comes out like this and goes down. It's not. It's squished incredibly thin. And it's much more like, as telling David, it's much more like in your driveway when you see oil in a puddle. the oil diffusing out and collapsing and making patterns. That's the kind of dynamic you see. It's very thin film type activities, so everything's squished much flatter than you think. But I did see some beautiful things, though, in terms of, things I sort of expected but looked different and better. Was a cold front where it looked like there was this carpet of cloud that someone had ripped up the edge, and you could see the cold wedge of air underneath it. It's just like everyone had peeled up the edge of this cloud, and you could see the cold wedge underneath it. And it's very cool to sit there, and you go over the Sahara and see all these dune waves, and that looks really good. And then you swing down, and then you're looking at icebergs on the same orbit. Minutes later. So you're going around the whole planet and doing a Cook's tour of all the Earth science you ever thought about. And it's very, very beautiful. And the other thing that did surprise me is I expected to see the Earth curve this way. And I wasn't disappointed. It does. But I didn't expect to be able to see the Earth curve this way too. And then I was really aware that the Earth and all of us are kind of glued on the outside of a ball. And it's a ball tumbling through space. And I hadn't really seen that in my head before, that the Earth was a ball. And somehow, the Apollo image from the moon, it looks like a circle somehow to me. It doesn't look like a ball, but this I felt it was a ball. It was a big blue exercise ball like you do your abs. And it was doing this. And the sun was moving. You could track the sun move like that, up from the horizon, like a little nuclear blast. You could see it move like this, and all the shadows on station would tilt. It's very beautiful. So it's good. I would say that the experience as a scientist and at a personal level is very, very good. You see a lot of things that you wouldn't expect.
So you showed
Improvisation in space all the time, particularly spacewalking, because you get these kind of cold welding phenomena. When equipment gets very cold, the lubrication fails. Or if it's been out there for a long time, the lubrication just turns to mud. All the solvents dry out. So things stick, things break, things come apart. I undid a unit once. I was working outside, and it just came apart into its constituent pieces and started to drift out of me, and bam, shoved it back into its hole. Help! Basically got a wire tie, which is like a coat hanger, and pulled it all together and had this big mess of metal parts, which you do not want floating around your space station, getting jammed in solar array drives and things like that. So you were overtrained because so many things that unexpected happen. NASA's budget is 13 billion a year, 13 to 14 billion a year. Shuttle program, which is coming to the end, is 3 and a bit billion. Station program is 3 billion. The rest is science and other stuff. So it's more than half of the program is manned space. However, the whole of the NASA budget, including Hubble, climate, science, funding for you, the whole NASA budget is about 0.6 to 0.7% of the federal budget. 0.6 to 0.7%. So it's a very small national investment in a rather worthwhile activity. One of the reasons why the United States has invested for the last 50 years in NASA and manned space is to keep the United States at the front of aerospace. Dominant world lead, materials, structures, computers, flight control systems, life support, all those things. They're driven by the manned space program and then flop out into industry. And, it's worked. Hey, more than half the world's aerospace industry is still securely in the United States and looks like it's going to stay there. And government investment has been a terrific bang for the buck. So Your tax dollars at work. Your 0.7% of your tax dollars go quite a long way. These are just the best pictures from the mission that Mark put together. And I'll talk about some of the more interesting ones. Otherwise, you can just look and enjoy. This is during that tip maneuver, where you're looking straight at the nose of the shuttle from the station. And that's looking at the business end of the shuttle as it tipped over. Yeah, no, it's a lot of potential thrust there. This is where we all got together for a picture where we're all in the position on our patch names. Here's trying to eat in space. This is always fraught with peril. You can get porridge in your hair. That's Mark looking heroic on the flight deck. He's flying next month, by the way, again. Himalayas, glaciers, isn't that pretty? Look at those things. Everyone on the flight deck. It's Lisa. She's a robotics officer and perched on a little saddle there. Steve is the commander. Hard to get a photo of him. He's very evasive. Stephanie, another robotics officer and in charge of payloads. That's me outside, early in the morning, feeling sleepy. That's Mike, his first spacewalk, and he was really enjoying it. And I took a photo of him. He's an Aggie, by the way. He's the first and second Aggie in space. Yeah. Here's both of us on the end of that boom, coming into daylight, which is good because we were getting freezing cold out there on the end of that thing. And here's me waving at Mike. And that's out on the end of the boom. And they told me to get off the foot platform and just hang there, which felt very strange. It's taking a photo in your visor. There's the boom up against the space station. You see the pair of us on the end of it, bouncing around. Blue shadow because of blue earth shine. Ah, how about that? The pair of us on the boom. There's the little Russian Soyuz vehicle. Soyuz, right on the side. Here's Mike living out his fantasies. Here's Mark looking on disapprovingly. This is how you sleep in space. Tied into a sleeping bag and velcroed down. Eye patches, earplugs, still doesn't work. It's hard to sleep in space. Very hard. Two girls. All dressed up and clean. Again, that's hard to do. So here's Lisa demonstrating how to do a shampoo in space. Put it on, you put some warm water on, swill it around, it's good. There's the Nile again, but upside down on the Red Sea. Me and Mike posing next to a Russian spacesuit, thinking, God, I'm not going to use that. An Aggie meets a Texas Longhorn person. So, yeah, you can see they're doing the two things. That's England. Oh, and my nose pointing at England. There's Steve, he's signing the log. Everybody who visits space station, every commander of every crew writes a little something like, it was nice to be here, the food was great. You know, something like that. Landing back at Kennedy, and same thing again. And that's about an hour and a half after landing. That was it. All done. Thanks very much for your attention.